Okay. What are we going to generally be looking in this particular session? So we look at the project that we designed in 2017, 2018 it was implemented. Was completed in 2021. We look at its impact. So we'll have our story shared by 3 of the universities that participated in the program. And then we look, what did we really learn from that particular process and what can others learn? And probably can also give us input on what can be done better in this particular process of aligning our curricula to the job market. So what really is the FAIR? The project itself means transforming higher education, transforming employability for social change in East Africa. So our goal was really to see how do you develop the critical thinking and the problem solving in our students. How can we be student-centered, or our learning is actually led by the students themselves. We looked at integrating a gender-responsive pedagogy, so that we are designing learning spaces and learning activities that are all inclusive. And one thing we did also leave out is our culture. Some of the things that may make the learning not really inclusive. So that was really one of the perspectives that we put into our perspective as we were designing this particular project. The TEFEA model starts with bringing stakeholders into the place. Who are our stakeholders? Who are your stakeholders as institutions of higher education? So we are looking at the job market. So we are looking at the working space. We are looking at our communities, where we live, our living spaces. We are looking at the student. What do they want to become? We are looking at the institution itself. What is the dream you have for your graduates? Where do you want them to learn? What do you really want them to become? We bring them all together, they think together, and they design, or they give us the requirements from different perspectives. We're looking also at the policymakers, the regulators. Yes, somebody talked about the requirements of the regulators. All of them are brought into the same room to really decide what are the requirements of the labor market, but also what kind of a graduate then do we need out there. So the next step to define that particular graduate is what we call the program alignment. How do we align our programs to the vision of the university, but also what the employers want? What does the labor market want? What is the kind of a graduate profile that we need? And also ensuring that we put into the heart of what the student really wants to become. What is their own dream? So we did that at program level, but we also went down to the course level. If you teach your course and it amends to itself, what will the student become in one semester? So the faculty member, you're thinking at that particular level. You think of the program, what does my university want? What does my program want? But what do I want through my course to achieve that particular vision, but also a personal vision, so that there is that buy-in of the faculty as the owner of the process. That meant we had to change what we teach. How do we teach for transformation? So you cannot be leading others to be critical thinkers and problem solvers if you are not a critical thinker and a problem solver. So we took our multipliers or the change makers, who are the lecturers, through that particular process. So they start thinking, rethinking anew. How do we teach? Why do we teach? How do we get our students to become? So we first identified people who are passionate, the institutions identified who are passionate about the desired change, and then they become the change makers or the drivers, so the developing leaders. So for each institution, we identified the people who will lead the change in their own institutions, and they participated in the project. Once you changed in your way of thinking and how you perceive your students and how you perceive the world of work and where they are going to go, then we redesigned our courses. What concepts do these graduates need? What concepts do we need to put in place? What knowledge do we need to put in place to develop the graduate we have defined? Then what kind of assessment? Remember that we're talking about the accredited bodies that require that we do assessments. But what kind of assessments do we put in place so that this student is able to assess their becoming, and you can also assess their becoming? So you will need to align the knowledge and the assessment so that you can decide then what learning activities are necessary to develop the competencies? Because competency is developed in the process of doing. Then what learning environments do I need to create? Remember, we have to rethink the working space and the living space. These students will go and live in their communities. Can we design learning places that are actually responding to both the working and the living spaces? So the process would usually take like 5 days, very intensive, in really designing this, aligning the knowledge with the assessment and the linking it with the environment, the learning environment, and the learning activities. Then, how do you design for significant learning? So they would get into the space where together, first of all, there was a lot of disharmony between courses taught in the same program. So it's really harmonizing and also designing a tool that allows it to reflect on the pedagogies that you are implementing. So as a change maker, you also become a reflective practitioner, that you're thinking about what you're doing, and you're able to document that, and you can reflect on it and also teach somebody else, so that we are actually changing and going towards the same direction. Then at the end of it, it's really producing that ideal graduate for any university with the 21st century skills. Whichever those ones are, we all know that you're able to communicate yourself, you're able to really create your own job, probably. But the most important bit was also the student taking up that initiative to develop their portfolio, their journey. They decide, this is the knowledge I need to acquire, but where do I apply it? And making that decision themselves, where they are going to apply that by reflecting on their living space and also on the working space. So to take us into the next conversation, what was our impact? I will invite and introduce my co-panelists. We have Dr. Luswati from Uganda Materials University. They worked with us throughout the project. We also have University of Dodoma, represented by Professor Fabian, and we have Dr. Mo from Bulu University. I don't know whether there's a way we can see their faces once they start talking. So to start off this conversation, I'll invite Dr. Luswati, and Dr. Luswati will share with us what it really means to align curricula to the needs of the job market from their experience at Bulu University.
Thank you very much, Mary. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
I greet everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. And I thank Mary for introducing what TESEA did. The theme that I want to respond to is, what does it mean for curricula to be aligned to the needs of the job market? And allow me to begin by giving a little background where we began as TESEA. We had a situation in our region, East African region, where employers were complaining about the quality of the graduates from our universities in the region. And I know it should be the same situation in other regions of our continent. And there was a mismatch between the skills that the higher education institutions offered to the graduates and those that the industry needed. And allow me to say that there are two causes to this. First of all, there was a disconnection and mistrust between the higher education institutions and the industry. On the one hand, the higher education institutions worked as ivory towers. They were doing their things disconnected from the needs of the industry. And there was also suspicion. The higher education institutions thought that the industry did not know what they needed. And the industry also thought the higher education institutions didn't know the skills we needed. So there was that suspicion. The other cause was on pedagogy and the curriculum that we designed, which were not informed by the needs of the community and the industry. For long, teaching, assessment, and curriculum design focus more on the content knowledge and less on the skills and competences needed by the industry. And many times these were left to the realm of curriculum, hidden curriculum, so that they would develop spontaneously and not intentionally. And yet the 21st century industry requires skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, communication, innovation, creativity, think of collaboration, team spirit, and other human skills, but also habits of mind, attitudes, and values. So when we say curricula to be aligned to the needs of the job market, what do we mean? First of all, we mean linking higher education institutions with the industry and the community. And in this regard, the curricula should be informed by practice to know the needs of the industry and the communities. So there should be a conversation between higher education institutions and the industry, and then be able to identify the needs and problems which the courses that are being designed need to solve. So what we did in the test here, we had joint advisory groups, which comprised of members from the private and public sector and the community. And these engaged more with the universities in the region that participated in the test here, advising on the skills and competences that are needed, but also participated, the members of the JAGs participated in the course redesign processes that we had. They also identified placements for students and staff and engaged as guest speakers, but also founding and helping in the students' innovation clubs. So there was that possibility that was given. However, we always took care of flexibility and adaptability so that the students are not boxed to one type of work. Since here we are talking of transferable skills, that's why the notion of helping them how to think and not what to think. The other course was related with the curricular design and pedagogy. The other solution. So our approach was to not leave the employable skills and competences to the realm of hidden curriculum, but we intentionally cultivated them in the whole process of course planning, designing, teaching, and assessment. So we chose approaches, methodologies, and strategies that directly enhanced these employable skills. So they were reflected in the learning outcomes. Many times when we are designing curricula, we don't have these reflected in the learning outcomes, but we intentionally had them reflected in the learning outcomes for each course unit and for each session that one had to teach. But they also are always part of the assessment process, both the formative and summative assessments. And we used the German-based approach where we were suggesting, and we're still working on this, where content knowledge should take 30%, then know-how, those are the skills, 40%, and the know-being, which includes the attitudes, values, and habits of mind, taking 30%. Then also the learning activities should be chosen in such a way that they are learner-centered to help the learners develop technical knowledge, but also the habits of mind and values. But also in other activities like the research papers, the dissertations, the projects should be aligned to the real needs of the society and to help solving them. So this is how we envisaged this process of aligning curricula to the needs of the job market, if I can, for the time being, stop there.
Thank you so much, Albert. Following on what Albert has just said, I'll call upon Dave Moog. He can share with us their experience at Bulu University of how they use the stakeholders to really redesign the curriculum that was responsive to the job market. Dave?
Wekamotu Wunducho Ninga Dawudi Monk. That's a Choli for saying habari, for saying asante sana, habari nawa selimu wote, jina langu ni Dawudi Monk. I hope I haven't butchered that too much. I'm trying to learn Kiswahili. Thank you very much. My name is David Monk, as I just said, and I was the deputy lead for the program at Gulu University, which is situated in the northern part of Uganda. So for us, the TESIA project was really centered in this community engagement. Gulu University has the motto for community transformation, and a recognition that, in fact, the university is, as a fairly young university, established in 2003, it has a strong responsibility and accountability to and tradition of working with the community. So TESIA came as an important aspect of developing the university and this motto and these goals. And the JAG, Joint Advisory Group, and the other elements of the TESIA program were deeply interconnected. So at Gulu University, we were working with 3 programs initially. I think I'll just start by explaining a little bit how it worked at the university. We had a technical steering group, which was a component of all of the deans and directors of all the faculties at Gulu University. And they were sort of, and also student leadership. So from the student guild, there were 2 members, and representatives of our joint advisory group, which are community employer representatives, were on this committee, and they met regularly to do the steering of how the project was working as a whole at the university level. And then we had the joint advisory group, which Albert has just elaborated on, which was really aimed at providing steering from the community into the whole TESIA program to make sure that to guide us both in the questions that we were asking and from the very beginning in terms of how do we want to shift the teaching practices and how to do that, but also participating in the actual implementation as well and guiding it. And then we were working with 3 faculties: the Faculty of Agriculture and Environment, the Faculty of Medicine, and the Faculty of Business. So within this context, I guess I just briefly like to come back to why the JAG, as I explained the JAG. So I think both Mary and Albert have very strongly explained it, so I won't go into too much detail, but really universities and knowledge making, both in research and learning processes, have become distanced and largely irrelevant to the needs of communities in the society that they're supposed to be serving, as is evidenced by the complaints in the labor force and many other issues not carefully being addressed. So we felt that, and we know that if universities are going to be relevant, we need to work with students and we need to work with communities and with a feeling of mutuality and respect, and develop relationships working together in order to solve the problems that we have in our society. And this is done through research, and it's also done through the students playing a very big role in terms of their knowledge mobilization, both of new theoretical conceptualized knowledge from the university to the community, and then also the knowledge of on the ground experiential circumstances that exist in society. So in our space in agriculture, on our JAG team, we had representatives from society that are considered as elders in the society and knowledge holders in the society in terms of the needs of community, local community, and the needs of the students as they're graduating. So we had in agriculture, Gulu is in a fairly regional, a fairly rural area. It's a new city in a very rural area, and so agriculture forms a big part and a big strength of the programs that we have. And we had a couple of local successful farmers that were components at that hire a lot of our students, take a lot of our students, both as interns and as graduates. And then some members that are working in agribusiness as well. So not only as farmers, but as extension officers and in business and trading around agricultural products and developing technology for agriculture. We had from business, we had a bank manager and some local entrepreneurs that have small, medium-sized businesses that understand the needs very well of the society. And we had some in medicine, some public health officers and the director of the local hospital as well. And then we also had from government, some government representatives from the National Council for Higher Education, which are responsible for approving new curriculum at universities, and also some representatives from education as well. So that was the sort of the JAG, and in that spirit, we were working together really from the very beginning. We needed the JAG not just so that they start to provide input into the curriculum, which is what they started to do, and they participated in these curriculum redesign processes that we went through, but also in coming to give guest lectures, and they also participated in, during COVID, we had a guest speaker series talking about some of the new innovations that are going on at Google University and the different faculties, and they were always paired together with our JAG representatives. They also provided an important link to other members outside of their community. So we had JAG members that joined our, we developed a committee for community university engagement. And that committee was really focused on integrating, especially we started with internships, but integrating research and the internship process in a transdisciplinary way that is more realistic in terms of the context of how the real world works, right? So we're trying to think about how we can use the internship process to actually get a realistic experience of the community and the settings in which the students are learning, getting contextual experiential learning experience that can complement their program of learning, but also being aware that there's a social element as well, so that they need to also develop the interpersonal skills and intercommunity skills to be able to solve community problems, identify the community problems, and solve the problems that are there, because that's what we'll need them to do. So in that way, we were really focusing on trying to break down these barriers of transdisciplinary practice, and that happens through the realistic experience, I think. But at the community, at the university level, it required a lot of meetings, a lot of connecting, a lot of developing sort of a community of practice, a couple of communities of practice around themes, around issues in the society, where different employers and different people are coming in together across disciplines and across practice to really strengthen both the research component, but then in turn the learning component. We also wanted to do we also wanted to have lecturers participate in internship processes as well, so that would further integrate the connection between the experience, the research, which the lecturers are typically doing, but also now bringing that into the having them not just being researchers, but more as a participative type of research, and also just an engagement and understanding of the society as well, so that they can then bring that into their curriculum and also develop stronger relationships and understanding and contextualize their lectures. So unfortunately, COVID has blocked that, but now we're scrambling to reorganize after COVID, and I think it's something that we're going to continue to progress with. Certainly in terms of, as we move forward, this important component, what we've established through the JAG is a stronger relationship with the community, and an opportunity to continue to have that input. So it's not over. The TESIA project is finished, but it really, what we see it as is just a beginning of continuing to strengthen those relationships and strengthen ways and learn from our mistakes of how to integrate more and adapt to the constantly changing needs of society, and so that the university remains relevant both for the students and for the community. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. He's talked a lot about what we are calling JAG. JAG is a joint advisory group, something that we really want to identify who are our key stakeholders, and also getting the commitment of that JAG to work with the university. So if you're existing in an agricultural space, probably your JAG are mainly in agriculture, then you're designing learning spaces in the sector rather than the institution. Now, I will call upon Professor Fabian from University of Dodoma, and Professor Fabian will be sharing with us how they were able to actually adapt the TESEA model, and tell us how can we be able to adapt this model in our institutions. Professor Fabian.
So thank you very much, and welcome everyone. I'll continue where my colleagues have actually explained. And I will talk about the model very briefly. As it says, it is the Transforming Higher Education for Social Change in East Africa model, or simply the TESEA model. Really, this is not something that is very new, except that it is an approach from East Africa that utilizes rigorous methodology of pedagogy and curriculum redesign in order to transform teaching and learning in higher education. And we started looking at employability. We asked ourselves, what does employability really mean? Is it limited to our graduates just going to be employed? Although we had those stakeholders who were partners in actually identifying the right skills, soft skills that they require in the job market. As we all know, most higher learning institutions can be isolated and kind of giants within the community and hardly connecting with the community. And that is why we had those JAGs, which were explained by Albert and David. So we thought employability should be wider, should include self-employment, entrepreneurship, but not limited to that, but also inclusive of gender responsiveness, so that everyone is included in the development of the nation itself. So what does this model do? This model puts the student at the center of learning. And also it transforms the lecturers into becoming facilitators of learning, while the student who is at the center of learning becomes a partner, taking responsibility in their own learning. And therefore, this model is planned in such a way that it supports lecturers and students. On the side of the lecturers, it transforms their teaching and learning experiences. So lecturers become facilitators who are capable to elicit thinking, critical thinking for the students and their problem-solving skills, so that students actually became critical thinkers who are capable of solving problems in their communities, and of course, who are capable of matching the skills that are required by the employer, both private and public, but also students who are gender responsive, because we included gender responsive pedagogies. And in the gender responsive pedagogy, we are looking at the learning space. And we are not limited to the classroom experience, but how the classroom is organized, how the participation is actually taking place, plus the learning activities, how is it participatory? And this was from the initial cause of transforming teaching, which was facilitated by AFELT. And therefore, this was meant to transform the lecturers into becoming facilitators, into forming partnership with those who are being trained, who are really partners, because they are the ones who matters. So the students were taken on board as partners, and they participated from expected learning outcomes or the intended learning outcomes, the classroom activities, up to assessment activities, and activities outside the classroom. And as Mary mentioned earlier during the introduction, it utilizes multipliers. And who are these multipliers? These multipliers were lecturers who were from participating institutions who were trained at the beginning. And the main objective of having the multipliers is to increase the number of trainers who will train others, because we know our institutions are huge, and a small group of facilitators from AFELT, a couple of them or a dozen of them was not going to be able to actually capture all these institutions. So these multipliers, they had a multiplying effect, and therefore to scale up the model itself to the rest of the lecturers in the institution. But not only that, these multipliers also acted as nuclei. Each multiplier became a nucleus of change, the inspirational, where others can draw examples and actually be able to apply the model. And the gender responsive pedagogy, as I mentioned, was meant to have gender responsive learning spaces. And when we talk of learning spaces, we actually consider the student as a partner, right from intended learning outcomes. We had all those more than 100 programs being included, but each one has its own technical skills. It doesn't matter, they are able to have the technical skills, but also it matters on how they actually acquire those skills and take them on board and own them. And therefore, from intended learning outcomes, when we were designing the courses, the students were brought on board and they could understand clearly why are they having those learning outcomes. But also, why should they have those learning activities, the classroom arrangement, the campus life, and all that was considered in the gender responsive pedagogy. Now, this model, after being implemented, it was tested. And actually, it showed a change. And this change was proven in both Uganda and Tanzania. And our evaluation actually revealed that there was a positive shift in the knowledge and skills of teachers in actually becoming facilitators and using those pedagogical skills that inculcate critical thinking and problem-solving skills. But also, there was an increase in the frequency of students engaged in critical thinking and problem-solving and becoming, having their own initiatives to actually initiate activities which are geared to entrepreneurial activities in the community around them, but also supporting the communities in activities of self-employment. And of course, the collaboration, there was a change between the in the relationship between students and the lecturers who are now facilitators. So there was an increase in collaborative activities between students and teachers or lecturers who are now facilitators. And therefore, they own their own activities and they felt responsible for their own outcomes of their learning. And therefore, during the redesigning of the curricula, as explained in detail by Albert, industry, public and private stakeholders, policymakers, regulators, and community was brought on board. And they gave their inputs on what kind of skills they think they would like the graduates to be, who can be employed, but with regard to the community, what kind of change the community actually requires. And therefore, finally, we did like for those courses which were 3 years, there was course redesigning right from beginning to the end. And therefore, finally, the whole program was redesigned and aligned in accordance with our partners and, of course, the students themselves, because they became partners. Maybe Mary wanted me to say something about how this model could be applied elsewhere. Am I right, Mary?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. As said, the TESEA model has been proven to work in the 2 countries and the institutions which we're implementing, and those institutions where we actually scaled up and scaled out. So the model is adaptive. It can be adapted to different environments, because we are East Africans, but you can see you take Uganda, they may have slightly different environments compared to Tanzania, but this model would be adapted in those environments. And therefore, the most important thing was to have the pedagogical approaches. And then to look at the culture, at the resources, because we know these are countries with limited resources, and this was considered when each of the institutions was actually adapting the model. So this is a model that can be adaptive, and it can actually be not imported, but adapted by different institutions with different settings. And it can be also done virtually. When we were implementing, the COVID pandemic hit, and we were in the middle of the implementation of this model, but we were able to go online. So it is a flexible model that could be adapted face-to-face, but also that could be implemented online as an online training pedagogical approach, and course redesign actually was effective as we implemented the rest of the project during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we would say those changes in summary indicated that there was a change in both facilitators, the lecturers who are now known as facilitators in teaching for critical thinking and problem solving skills, and the students learn how to think and not what to think, and they became innovative and even started their own students' clubs, various students' clubs. Some of them were gender clubs, some of them were innovation clubs, Some of them were entrepreneurial clubs, some of them were business clubs. So students became innovative as they actually became critical thinkers and problem solvers. And the communities around the institutions, of course, benefited. And we would say that the learning environments became more inclusive from the gender responsive pedagogies. And therefore, both academics, students, they considered each other as partners, but most importantly, universities now were open to collaborate with the external partners who most of them are actually employers. And I think I will end there in case of anything that my colleagues wanted to add, please. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Prof, for sharing that model and how it can be cascaded to other levels. In conclusion, I'll ask each one of you to just share the one lesson you took out of the experience in implementing the TCM model in your institution.
Mary, there are many things, but since you asked for one, I would say the biggest for me was the linking of the higher education institutions with the industry and communities. Unlike the situation before, and which is common in many higher education institutions in our continent, where universities remain as ivory towers, that are separated from the needs of their societies. So I think that's what I want to take.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I took away from this was just how quickly especially the students appreciated the approach in the classroom. So the students that were working with the teachers that were the lecturers that were participating in the TESIA training programs. I mean, very quickly, I think as Flora alluded to as well, the students really now they're demanding that this different style is being used, and they're appreciating the value of it, and the graduates as well. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me that I learned, just how quickly change can actually happen. And once it starts, it's hard to stop.
The biggest change that I noted, I mentioned earlier, it's how students could actually comfortably collaborate with the lecturers and became completely responsible for their own learning. There were tendencies in the past. For example, you consider what we call coursework, where students are given various assignments to work on, and it contributes to their grades. And most of them weren't being serious, actually, with the coursework, as long as they can get some material somewhere, put it down, and just submit. But we noted with the implementation of this model, students were really eager to do their own assignments and to go a distance to actually look into community issues in my area. If it is project management, really, what is done in the community? What kind of things do I need to do to manage a project which is actually going to touch the community? So a big change from students being transformed into becoming responsible for their own learning, but partnership between students and lecturers. And as I said, when I was finishing, partnership between institutions, which normally we felt higher learning institutions, it's like we know it all. But there was this big transformation that we could partner with the employers, with the community, entrepreneurs, industry, and actually enrich the skills for our students.
Thank you so much. Just hang on so that if you have any questions to our facilitator. That question right there.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm very happy to you started with competency, that I was disappointed I had lower. If you are talking about competency-based approach, we are talking about what learners can do. We are not for learners to go. And when we are talking about what learners can do, we are talking about professional and technical learning. And I didn't hear anything about we setting up machinery, and we are producing this and that, the learners are able to do ABCD. We are only learning about cognitive, the same thing that we have in our curriculum all the time, and extension based, which has never worked in Africa. I think we are living in a society where we are struggling for learners to do something on their own when they come out from school. So when we're talking about competency, I was very excited because I was expecting that we were going to talk about focusing more on vocational skills. I think that's what I was expecting. And I was expecting also that when we are talking about the approach, I don't know about my colleagues, but I didn't get the approach from them. Because the approach was, if it's a new approach that you are adopted, the approach will be more focused on what is the learner able to do. Because when you talk about cognitive, how they're able to, I think every curriculum have that, and I think people are trying their best to make sure that that is done. But it doesn't work. So I think we should be looking more on how we go back to the drawing board in our schools to have vocation. At the carpenter, you want the learner to do the drawing. If you want to see what they have done, I think that's the only way we can be able to progress. But if you are looking at the learning all the time, cognitive thinking, how they were able to get out and all those things, I think we are able to do in Africa, and I think that we need to be careful. Thank you very much.
All right, I don't know whether any of us want to respond to that. He's posing a question to us. Are we just talking about cognitive abilities, or are we also talking about the vocational abilities that these students need in the job market?
Let me respond to this question in this way. First of all, where we started, it wasn't new curricula. We had this curricula which were being implemented. And using the surveys that we did at the beginning, we realized that a lot of our graduates are not being employed. And then the next thing we asked ourselves, is there a gap in the market and needs in the market, but not matching? And then we realized, yes, both were there. We had some gaps where there was no matching. You find the industry employing someone who actually does not have those skills, but they had the soft skills that actually gave them a plus, and they got employed. So we looked at the curricula. So when we talk of redesigning, we had the content, and what we did is to bring on board the partners now to have a look at the curricula and identify areas where we had gaps and areas where we had superfluous, where we had more than what is actually required in the government, in the specific market. And therefore, we kind of matched the technical requirements or the technical skills that are required in the market. And on top of that, now we input the soft skills, which we have been talking about. So this is a collaborative kind of activity, and the model allows all the partners to be on board and work together to realign the curriculum to bring out what is required in terms of soft skills, but also in terms of technical skills.
Dave, did you have something to share about your experience in Gulu on that, developing the technical skills?
Yeah, I think for us the big thing is, especially through the course redesign process, was I mean, that was at the center of the whole thing, was to develop these soft skills, life skills, however, 21st century learning skills, however we want to describe them. I think we were trying to address that, because employers were telling us that students weren't able to, and the needs of students that where there wasn't industry employment possible, students weren't able to adapt to the environment. They weren't able to work autonomously on their own. They were afraid of taking risks. They didn't have this capacity to learn as they're going, so to look for new things, new ideas. All of these things, the interpersonal skills, communication, working with other people, working with customers, understanding the context of where they're working, all of these very important soft skills that are not being afraid of failing and working through and trying to fail, and then testing and trying, and all of these things that are so important for work. That was a core component of the curriculum alignment process. So in Gulu, we were there with Mary and also the team from Ashoka. They took us through this journeying, using portfolios, I guess, this idea of a journey. So we go through and say, okay, so in terms of, okay, sorry, coming back to the course redesign sessions, we started off with this space of who are your students and what is your ideal student, and how does how you teach them match those needs. So what does a farmer need to be in a holistic space, not thinking about the knowledge that they need, but what is it that they need to be as a farmer? Some of it is knowledge, but some of it is, there's a whole bunch of other things that are there. Or as a banker, if that's what the possible outcome is. So for any of the different possible outcomes of whatever the employment is that they're aiming for, the career trajectory that is a possibility for them, what is it that they're going to need? So I think that was really, that piece was at the core of the whole project.
Because 90% of what you were saying is exactly the same content of the discovery of what we're doing, both Tom and others can kind of talk about. The starting point exactly the same. Because the starting point was, I did a seminar for the workshop that won the government, and there were two steps. One, I did exactly the same as you, which is companies can't find people who are employable. Why? Because they've got their heads filled, but they've got no skills. Okay? And if you can't communicate, and you can't think critically, and if you can't collaborate with other people, I don't care whether you're an economist, or an accountant, or an engineer, or whatever, you won't get a job. Okay, that's what the company say. And I have hard stats on Africa. Okay, what's the other side? I mean, between confidential government figures at that time, 90% of the students who are graduating can't find a job 1 year afterwards. Yeah. They're unemployable. Yeah. Same starting point. Skip the journey. The journey is the same, right down to the multiplier. I mean, we call them, we had a different name for them and so forth there. But I mean, it's fascinating to see coming in different contexts, coming to the same conclusion. Tom and others can talk about. I've got a question. How many of you, just across the board, listen to the audience here, how many of you at your universities and schools, you are directly or indirectly dependent upon government funding? Show of hands. I'm just curious, in terms of statistics, how many are purely private, almost private, but it depends upon government directly or indirectly for funding. Okay, that's interesting, less than half there. Because my question to you was, what do you do? I mean, you argued it rightly. What were your no how, no what, no need? Okay, there are the three no's. You're saying 30% is no what, the cognitive elements, that's important. Okay, and then what happens when government evaluates and accredits 100% on the know what. Then you're funding. How can you do this? We're talking about collaboration, and I probably believe you were alluding, Mary, to stakeholder collaboration. We've got somebody sitting behind me here who's on the other side of the fence in Botswana, with the government authority, and she can talk about that. She left, to join the university sort of side. Getting a realignment here is very challenging and difficult, especially how did you deal with outside stakeholders? Did you have any obstacles to overcome that? Because the internal obstacle of how do you change a teaching culture? I was fascinated. You changed the name of teacher to facilitator. I would love to know more about how you do that in resistance. You alluded to another important thing, which is, a big block against this is the research. I'm at one of the top institutions in the world in terms of business research, okay? And we face that obstacle and so forth there because, researchers love to be able to teach their content in the classroom, get out of it and not facilitate and coach and so forth. I'm curious about how you handle stakeholders and, any lessons and so forth in how you converted teachers into facilitators.
All right. The one thing I'll say is that I come from the Association for Faculty Enrichment in Learning and Teaching. Our way of thinking has been transformed. And I remember the first meeting we had in the table was really facing the resistance from the professors, right? So we decided, we're not going to talk about we do is very important, but the mindset change. And in this particular setting, we had mainly the VCs and the lecturers, the professors that have been in the profession for a long time, and were saying, what new can we bring to the board? So we took them through the transformative learning and the designing for significant learning. We allowed them to go through the process. By the end of the workshop, they were actually not questioning us. They were asking, when can we start? Okay. So taking them through the experience itself without telling them about the experience. So when we had our moderators, we talked to them about that. Bringing the stakeholders into the room, we allowed the university to decide who are their stakeholders. Where do your students mainly learn? In the job market. They're saying they don't have the competencies to work. So actually, the technical skills were not the question. We do very well on technical skills. It is the softer skills. Being able to collaborate, being consultant in that thing, that was the biggest question. Curator question, do they go out with project management skills? Those are the things we concentrated on. So we talked about the age of portfolio. The lecturers themselves, this portfolio, their journey, they define their journey at the very beginning, that as a professor, this is the student I want to do to well. Then how do I create the significant learning spaces? Knowledge is there. Mr. Google provides all the knowledge. It's really what is appropriate and how do my students interact with the knowledge to be transformed to become. Yeah? So the whole process was really not really thinking so much about the knowledge because we have the curricula that is really content. Right? So if you have that and look at what you have, then how do you create the space where they engage and they learn? So the student designs their journey through the portfolio. And I know that this is what is expected of me. And I understand my community and the business sector that I'm going to do. Who can I collaborate with as fellow students? And how do we work on projects together? So they're developing, the approach was the project work pedagogy, and that is student-led. So maybe you can.
I want to add to that. For me, I feel like saying manifest. As you can see, I would take the position that majority of Africans, majority of our education system is so post-colonial.
Yeah.
Which don't help it. We do acknowledge that we should know where about it. Because we do borrow the theories and the ideas of the one ways and then the one that's a whole, and we don't want to believe, because when you talk of theory, this theory are a context. They define that theory within the context of the actual practical sentiment, which is an ideal geographic to our situation here. And so the average African student who grows up is not able to think to be agile, to think and then to look at the needs of his environment. Before he starts becoming creative to think of how to solve problems. And then the problem become a what? A job. Yeah. That is the whole capacity. Let me raise that issue here. And this is the result, and this is the area that has also propounded to the extent that it has created even a job mismatch of interest. So at the end of the day, the students turn out as a graduate, but because they didn't have the interest or the environment or the setting, the theory that was given to them was related to their exposure. And so at the end of the day, the issue here is, Madam was raising an issue that even partnering with their lecture. What kind of lecture? What kind of lecture? Because the lecture itself is telling his PhD 4 years, and then the PhD was at the top of somebody's theory. Yeah. And it's probably on when the person's level up. And so what are you going to partner? The person is partnering with somebody who propounds population studies theory, like Congress. And you are going to ask him the story of the home that he left. So at the end of the day, what is the critical issues on the ground? That you are going to propound the story out of it. Or you are going to look at it as a solution to the problem or create a job out of it. And this is where it has become an imperialism by university. And I think that Africans must begin to write and look beyond the box. Let's come together, our stakeholders must take responsibility. We need to talk and then tackle the issue from the ground and agree each other.
I do agree with you. As to respond, like, how do we overcome resistance? Because that's what we're talking about, right? You see, we cannot hate everybody and say that things have always been done. And what the model brought us into space is that we can unlearn and relearn. Yeah. Even the professor can unlearn and learn something new. When they're brought into this space, yeah, we thought the biggest obstacle for us was the accrediting bodies and the policy makers. But we also learned we have our own obstacles, yeah, because a path has been set. We want to stick to the path, but they tell us, tell us what is it that you want to do. The ISO process allows you to define your own qualities, right? So if you define your own quality badly, then you're going to be defined by that particular quality, right? But they allow us that, assessment is what lies line. We can't lie. If you significant assessment, when you're engaging your stakeholders to engage in that particular assessment process, then it allows you to design activities that produce the kind of a person you want. But if the stakeholders also tell you, are you producing the properly agreed upon? Yeah. And how do they engage in that process? I think the professors here said they invited guest speakers for the industry. So in your designing of who comes into the space, I have an entrepreneur who comes into the space to actually talk about the things that are significant for a person to become an entrepreneur, right? So we decided we have to break the barriers. The professor has to unlearn and relearn. The industry has to accept that they're part and parcel of learning. So there's this concept you have of the living lab. So you're not creating the labs, like for social sciences, you allow them to go to the community. So like what Google University is talking about, allowing them to go and work with the farmers, they have a consultant, they have a problem. They have a question they need to respond to. So they're working with the farmers. So they're helping that particular farm become a better farm within the semester. So their portfolio is really identifying what is the problem, who can I collaborate with my peers, which organization can I work with, what am I going to contribute to that? So there's what we call the spark, the moment when the theories actually make sense to you. The knowledge makes sense to you. But then there's that one, designing how do I bring this down to solve a problem, right? So then who are going to be my collaborators down there? Who can I work with? So we talk about the big organizations, but we're also concentrating a lot in your community. Are they SMEs? Yeah? What kind of an environment you have? How can you contribute to that? The person who assesses the portfolio becomes the assessment tool, and it is the student's journey. of being transformed. So the regulators will ask, how are you assessing your students? We use the portfolio, and you have samples of the portfolios of students. Maybe the written exam that you can come is the reflective part of that particular process. What did I learn? How did I learn? And what can I take into the job market? How can I scale this one up? That particular research becomes the end product of that assessment process. So we also have to rethink, how do we engage everybody in the assessment that drives the learning? Yeah, that becomes our critical part, and we have to engage to create that particular ecosystem. Because taken in isolation, universities are not to generate knowledge, but knowledge happens in the process of work. Yeah, so we have to engage. So there was also the suggestion that did come with how can we have the professor internally? 100%. I
think this is a bit of like it's not like so there's clear feedback even from the industry that students are lacking in practical space.
Yeah.
So that is what we have. A lot of industry feedback get students don't have the practice. Can you do it? Can you just get it to the office and just do the work? But what we are thinking over and above that, and if you just look at any newspaper, any newspaper advertisement, the job has got competence, the cognitive competence is really.
You have to speak a bit louder so that the online audience can hear.
All right. So you will find that the job requires the cognitive skill, which you get through your course, maybe BSc accounting. And then you see a section which has required soft skills, things like leadership skills, ability to think critically, ability to collaborate, ability to communicate. Now, this is what we are trying to focus on by changing the way that you teach students. Because if you don't change the teaching technique, then you're teaching students who can literally get an A, but they can't perform at work. And that's what Professor is saying. And that is what Professor is saying, that you may end up with an A student who not work. The slow content. We want to keep that, yeah. And you get a photo with what you're doing. I mean, that's how to do it, by changing your teaching methodology so that it is student-centered. So I think we're talking the same thing, just that the division we have clarity there. We are not saying that students have all the, all the practical skills needed. That is lacking. But on top of that, they are lacking also the soft skills. Most employers now look at somebody with soft skills because they're versatile. Even if they don't have, high-end technical skills, they can still learn on the job. Yeah. Now that is the bullshit. And you can only achieve that if you transform the way that you teach students. So yes, photo.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether we have any more questions. I can speak very loudly. You're having a challenge with the online audience hearing. Oh yeah, maybe you can move closer. So we can start with you. Maybe one half a second of a second. This laptop, this laptop. It's very short. It's the device. Can it be moved? No, it can't. Bigger. Okay.
I'll move it to the middle.
Okay, let me just down. So it's just very quick clarifying. I think work on real life projects and assessing the related portfolio. I think what I'm unclear about is what were the results of said portfolio, right? Once the curriculum was revamped, the students did this thing. What were employers saying as a result of this revamped curriculum? Were the students now more employable? I couldn't quite get that from the presentation.
Okay, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, so the question is, what are the employers saying? Are they more employable? Yeah. Right? We had another question.
For me, it wasn't a question. I know we have missed a couple of discussions. But from what I heard, I wanted to share an experience at Kepler College. where I think it's most experienced from a lot of universities and colleges, where we go to our employers and ask for feedback. And we ask them, to you, for example, we speak to the HR managers. To you, who is the most hireable graduate? What are those things that you're looking for? And one of the most interesting things that we have always, year in, year out, always get as a feedback, it's not about the degree they're holding, by the way. Correct. It's about the competencies. And then when you go deeper to ask the questions, what are those key competencies? And one thing has actually been talked about everywhere, even sometimes. I know, yes, there is information or there is data that speaks about the necessity or the need for the tech skills of our graduates. It's true, but one country to another, the needs are different. So if I can share that experience in one, the most important skill most employers go for. The first thing is professional competence, soft skills. We want someone who's respectable, someone who knows how to keep time, someone who can work with other teams. So you realize if you go now to get that kind of feedback, you can actually allow yourself to really allocate your resources where they're actually really needed. And given the differences or the unique situations that our universities are facing from one kind of product, I think it helps, especially when we bring in our equitable stakeholders. And yes, as together here, as a collaborative, this is a platform where I share what works for me. And if it's something that you haven't ever thought of, then it's something that you can say, hey, why not go and try to see? Maybe I had never even thought this is important for me. And then let's say University of Cape Coast, they have never thought of the time management as a module. I kept our students before even they start their regular modules. We take them through this thing called the foundational period, the foundational course, where we teach a couple of skills that are clustered in different groups. We have the tech, and then we have the professional competencies, and then we also have this we call the business-based kind of management. So it's like problem-based teaching. And all this, we educate or we train our staff to be able to kind of instill those foundational skills for our students in order to be able at least to kind of, to draw out or to get the maximum knowledge out of their degree that they are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask if Albert is on whatever, but our time is up. Yeah, but there's one more question. Oh, yeah, she had a question.
Yeah, no, it was, I actually just another statement to, I guess also in the previous discussion, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your name is, talking about mindset shifts. So I think that's also a big thing, even as much as you can look at the curriculum and continue putting in things that, learning time management, leadership skills, the individual always knowing that they need to be a lifelong learner and concerned about their continued professional development is what will ensure that no matter what environment they go into, they're still keen on learning, not that these are the skills I learned, these are the skills I've come with, and this is as far as I go. It's always essentially an individual who's hungry to learn, to perform, to know what they don't know, and just be a lifelong learner. But I really enjoyed the session.
All right, thank you so much. I think because our time is over, I'll just share where you can be able to find our tools. We are glad to share, to really you can use the tools that we have to help you really design a curriculum that is reflective of your own context. And that's really I think my concluding remark is that for institutions of higher learning, have a dream of the kind of a graduate you want out there based on what is needed in the community, but also is reflective of the vision of the university. Yeah? Be reflective of that. What is the vision of the university? What is our community? What does our community need to be transformed? How can we make sure that we have that particular profile of a graduate that also asks the student what we really want to become? and then align all of them as you design your curricula. At AFELT, we are glad to work with everybody, the entire continent, in really rethinking this. I'm so glad when I saw what both our university is doing, because it's similar to what we're doing. Yes, I really thank you for taking time to be with us and to share this journey story. You can always share with us any ideas on how we can improve the model. Thank you.